Hey, it's a new year, and I know 2020 has been a bit of a challenging one, for want of a better term, but we're here, start of a new year, and things are pretty exciting. I've got my notes on my phone, so I wanted to sit down and do a 2020 in review post. It's been a year, been a bit of a better year than I'd hoped on the channel. I think, a lot of people spent a lot of time at home because they needed to for lockdown and safety reasons, and I'm pretty lucky that though it didn't quite succeed as well as I thought, the channel did end up having a really good year. So I want to talk about some of that, some of the challenges and complexities, but also talk about a few tweaks and things that are going to be coming up with this year on the show. Basically this year was the first time since 2017 I ended the year with a large amount of growth. We're talking like 30 odd percent, which is really incredible because in the last couple of years, the channel has basically flatlined, and I was expecting out this year, even though, I introduced the extra episodes in the middle of the year particularly when we were going through the worst bits of lockdown and some of the challenges there, I thought having that was enough to keep me going as well, and it sort of worked, although ultimately I'm going to be doing some reworking of those because I like the concept, but I didn't find them working as well, but we'll talk about that later. Another thing I'm really, really happy with is that I managed to get the channel to 2,500 subscribers. It took a bit over 2 years to do that, to go from 1,000 to 2,000, and it was nearly 4 years of doing videos before I even got to 1,000. So that increase in pace is actually really impressive, and I do believe that's based on some of the videos. I mean, if looking at my numbers and my stats, and I know I'm not going to go massively into detail, but I just want to talk about the top 10. Realistically, the top video of the year, and honestly probably the top video I've ever done, is the look at the Spectrum Next. The Spectrum Next After a Few Months video I did in July. That was a fluke timing it. That video I put together with my experiences of having my unit for a few weeks, being that I ordered the top tier accelerated one, and being that the challenges of the year really impacted in actually my machine taking a fair bit longer to arrive than a few other people. It meant that I was able to take advantage and talk about a few things that had happened in terms of software that had come out since launch, things like just some of the initial niggles and fitting it into my setup and whatnot, talking about a lot of that stuff. So it was a really interesting piece, and the timing was just magnificent because, of course, not long after, the Kickstarter for the Issue 2 machines kicked off in August and ultimately was stratospherically successful. That's where I really saw a whole bunch of channel activity. I mean, I might throw the graph up of the channel's performance during the year, and realistically that period from like mid-July to mid-September was very much the best performing time of the year, which is not normally the case. So I'm really happy with how that went. Following on from that, the look I did at the RetroTing 2X SCART, that's sort of the black sheep of that device's family, I feel. A lot of people are getting the original or the Pro or the Mini, but the SCART one, for a lot of people who deal with European computers and whatnot that use that, is a really handy device, and I'd like to think that was a good look at it, just in terms of showing how it looked in action. I'm really happy that device gets a lot of use, particularly in my streaming setup, and it's great for portability, and a device I'm really, really in love with, and I'm glad that did as well as it did. That was a piece that did really well. Following on from that was the sort of second part of my next coverage, which was a look at the alternate FPGA cores you can load on. That was very much a sort of last roll of the dice, to get something out before the Kickstarter ended, and it was pretty successful. It was, again, a pretty solidly performing video by my standards, and hopefully, I think talking about like doing an update some point this year prior to issue 2 units reaching people's hands, just talking about what you need, what to expect, the new OS updates and other materials. I think that would definitely be worth doing. Following on from that was the driving games series, particularly the first installment, which looked at the 3D driving games, your Vanishing Point races on the C64. That was a very solidly performing video, but still quite a bit behind those other ones in performance. couple of perennial favorites are in the list, like the Easy Flash 3 look I did, which is a very quick, very rapid look at that cart from several years ago. Still is one of those really popular videos, which I don't know, I feel like I never really explored a lot of features of it really in depth. I sort of talked about really just getting the best use out for games playing, but that's been doing well. Sort of the final follow-up of the driving game series, which was looking at ones that viewers said, I didn't include in my roundups. That seemed to do fairly well, as did the Dark Ages video, which is one that actually is kind of really close to my heart. That's a video which talks about, if you haven't seen it, I really implore you do. It's one which I sort of showcased a bunch of 1990s C64 releases, the ones after the commercial demise of the machine and Commodore's collapse. Because I feel like there's this era ranging from about 1995 till about 2010, 2011, where we don't talk about those games. A personal lament is, I really wished that creators who are specialized on other micros would do similar videos. I'd love to see ones on Spectrum Games or Amiga. I kind of know some Amiga stuff, but I'm not hardcore enough an Amiga games player to be able to really do a good list. Or other Ataris or Apples or whatever. I don't know. I'd love to know more about that. If there are folks out there who are interested in doing that, I would love to chat with you about it. Of course, the Ultimate 2 Plus still is another one that's a good look and insightful. That performed really well. That, again, like the Easy Flash one. But that one I'm actually mostly happy with. It's a really good video that talks about the device and why I think if you're a C64 owner, you should have an Ultimate as your main device. But that's probably an unpopular opinion. And then really rounding up the top 10 was the overhead scrolling driving games roundup and the single screen driving games roundup videos. I actually still want to do a series like that for other platforms at some stage. That's one of those things I want to do this year. So performance-wise, I'm really happy with how the channel's gone for 2020. It did a lot better than I thought. Sure, it didn't quite probably get the numbers percentage that other channels did. I know some other creators who are in a position to capitalize a bit better on it. For me, the nature of what Scanlines is a more scripted, more researched, more slower-paced series probably doesn't inspire that as much. But considering that, the channel 2 years ago, nearly, in 2018 and 19 was basically flat, to have growth is actually something that I'm really, really happy with. And of course, thank you to everyone who's joined, who's subbed, who's started watching, who's supporting the channel and all of that. So we're in a good spot for 2021, I think. There are challenges. I think these are the things that I've highlighted looking at just watching the channel performance, watching how things progress, that sort of impacted on really the channel doing better. The first one is really getting videos in front of viewers. I've said this elsewhere, but I quite frankly think the algorithmic driven nature of platforms like YouTube and other social media platforms, particularly for smaller creators, is a hazardous, toxic thing. Because basically, it corrals you down a very narrow railroad. It wants you to be a very specialized creator, a very small niche. And personally for me, that just bores me senseless. I don't want to be a creator with a very narrow niche. What I'm personally interested in is in exploring the wider medium. Basically, I really want to explore things wider. And if I have to be this narrow niche to succeed, then I don't want to play by that rule. One of the things I've noticed is, for example, I could put a video out and I might be lucky to crack 100 views in 24 hours, which, when you look at the wider picture, seems really wrong. Now, that might be, I have a lot of dead subscribers, people who subscribe and who actually aren't interested in what I'm doing and just don't click the unsubscribe button. That's highly possible. I really wish I could clean the subscriptions up more often. If they don't like what I'm doing, unsubscribe. The other thing I think is the niche channel I run, it doesn't get picked up. And from what I've seen other creators doing, I watched a video by another creator last night that came out roughly when I started noticing my problems in 2018, that basically really echoed a lot of feelings that I had. I think I don't have a popular channel, I don't really follow the algorithm, and so it wasn't showing those videos. So more and more, I'm convinced that my channel isn't liked by the algorithm. It never will be. And there might be a thing where a person will come and watch a video that I put out, but they don't. But because, quite frankly, I have a lot of viewers who are very tied to one platform or another, and being my own multi-platform focus, because again, it strokes my itches and my own discovery things. They may not like the next video I put out, and so it doesn't come up on their homepage again. One of the I think that's the biggest problem I think I want to solve at the moment, because I'm not going to give up multi-platform stuff. I'm not going to start second channels. Remember, I'm doing this out of my own spare time, and whilst at the moment, thanks to 2020, I have a bit more time, that's not going to be forever unless things drastically pick up. The next thing is like this balance between in-depth. Like my remit, if you will, for Scanlines is I want it to be in-depth explorations. Now, mostly that's in-depth on a single game. That's sort of what I really prefer doing. That's what I enjoy doing. And if I talk about my favorite videos of the year, that's where a lot of them are. You know, videos looking at like Gunhead on the PC Engine, East on the Master System, Steel Ranger. Those ones I'm really proud of. And so being able to do that in-depth exploration is really what the show is about. Now, the roundups, like those C64 Dark Age videos and the driving game series, they're good for exploring a topic, but they're not exploring a game. And whilst I would probably still do those kind of videos from now and then, again, I really want to do that driving games roundup on other machines. And I'd love to. I think that that's very interesting to see how things progress on different sides of the fence. But basically, it really means, you know, it's that craving, and I think that finding that balance between doing that is really important. I would rather do single game stuff, but sometimes a roundup might be nicer when things are a little more under time pressure. And sort of going on with that, you know, this in-depth coverage. One of those things is I am going to take time to do videos because I want to give a game a fair play. It's one of the things, if you watch the episode on Steel Ranger, this is something I very much commented on, because that game is nearly 3 years old, and I really only felt in the right mindset to play it earlier, like last year when I actually streamed it. I'd played it a little bit on launch, but didn't really get a circle back to really dive into it until a few months ago. And I think that what that means is that I was able to give it a better bit of exploration, a better analysis, and I think it turned out a really good video. It's a video I'm still very proud of. Now that kind of thing when it comes to new releases is kind of tough, because there is the scrambling out there. You know, a lot of people will scramble to just rush out something on an emulator. Some will just do a first impressions kind of thing. But for me, I want to do these games justice, whether new releases for classic systems or games from back in the day. There is a lot to talk about and a lot to explore, and I think they're worthy of really good written criticism, and that's really a goal of what I try to do with my videos. Following on from that, one of these other things that I really sort of noticed, so I think there was a subtle shift in how I produced episodes as the year went on. You know, at the start of the year, I did Crazy Blaster, which I loved, a great little short focused game that was really good fun to play and well worth checking out. I followed on that with the reissue of It's Magic 2, which I didn't quite like so much. And that's a video that also really had a few toxic discussions in it, which have been cleaned up. Which sort of reminds me that ultimately, community stuff, which we'll get to. But one of those things in doing that was, I really, like, even if it's a game I don't like, I want to try and critique it in a positive light. And that really means that I think there are some games that I'm just never going to cover because I bounced off them quite dramatically. In fact, it's actually why I ended up re-looking at Nightingale, because I never really looked at that game. I played it a chunk, but I never really finished it, or I never really explored it in more detail. It was basically a reaction to picking a couple of newer releases that I really bounced off of. They're not like, oh, I see what this game is trying to do, and it's not doing it as good as it could have been. No, this is more, these games are trying to do something that I think is utterly bad design. Now, that's a very subjective thing, you know, and I have a different impression on design. And one of those things that I talk about a lot is I really like seeing developers who write new games for classic systems take some cues from learnings from modern games. I think there are things you can do positively to make the experience much better. One of those big ones for me is not wasting the player's time. I really hate games that do that. And so, you know, there's that aspect to it, and I find that along with that, I really want to give games their due. So I'm not going to be rushing out stuff within the first few weeks unless I get early access to a game, which is possible. I feel like, you know, I know a lot of developers are very sensitive because of the cracking scene and whatnot, and I really have made a lot of developer friends on other machines. But, you know, a lot of this is doing this under my own capability. So, again, I think new games, unless I can guarantee find something that's not getting coverage that I really dig, it's probably not going to happen until later on. Because I want more time to explore this stuff. It's really what the Scanlines remit is, after all. But one of those big changes, really, where it sort of feeds back to, is nostalgia. I found, because of this sort of shift in direction, like, I'm not really interested. I'm less interested in nostalgia, right? If I were to focus on nostalgia, you would see games on 4 machines: the C64, the Atari 5, there's the Apple II, because we had those in school during my primary school days, the Amiga, DOS PCs. I actually said C64, Atari 2600, Apple II, Amiga, DOS PCs. That's all I'd cover, because that's really the machines that I grew up with in my formative years, you know. Started gaming on an Atari 2600, upgraded to the C64, eventually moved to PCs. I had friends with them as well, so I played a bunch of stuff there. We had Apples in schools, and relatives had Amigas. So really, that's sort of what I'd explore. But the thing is, honestly, what I'm more interested in is learning about stuff that I didn't experience as I was a kid, right? Sometimes there are C64 games that I saw covered in ZAP or Commodore format that I never got to play because they're impossible to get down here, whether legally or not so legally. You know, there are also games that I never even heard of, you know, much older games that were early in the machine's life, and of course plenty of other developments. And so, you know, covering the stuff that I'm familiar with, unless I could find a new take on it, it is not really that exciting to me. I would rather spend my time sitting down covering stuff that's new to me. Stuff where even if a million words have been written about it, there's still, I can bring my own experiences and analyses into it. But the thing is, I really feel like this is something I need to work on, because I find it challenging when I make a video like this. And in the comments are very nostalgia driven, because I don't want to dunk on your nostalgia, right? If you had these fond childhood memories, that's cool. But I don't really know what I can say to that, because it's such a fundamentally different experience from someone coming new to these games in a more modern era, compared to someone who grew up with them, maybe got them on release, and had them be a formulative part of their gaming experience. And that's really a thing I need to work on with videos. And sort of going on from that is, I more and more want to pull away from making videos which are reviews. I think I do actually, like, I do sort of a mix. I feel like the writing I do for the videos for the channel is a very different, not quite nailing the retrospective kind of attitude, but that's sort of where I want to be. I do write reviews for elsewhere, you know, I'm writing for Reset and for a site that I do modern game stuff for. And one of those things is, there's a bit of a difference, because, you know, when I write the scripts that I write for Scanlines, I try to include a bunch of, you know, history, linking what a developer's done before, what they've done, linking, you know, original platforms, linking where mechanics go, and things like that. I try to sort of explore the connections and sort of how this game fits in with the wider medium as a whole. I want to do better at that. That's my thing. I don't really hear other creators talk about wanting to do what they do better, but that's something that I personally want to strive for, is to do those things better this year and keep doing that every year. But I really, you know, it really kind of bums me out when I post a video that I did a bunch of that work on, and someone drops a comment that's like, great review. And it's like, well, again, I don't want to be rude, but it's sort of like, well, I think you missed the point of what I'm trying to talk about here. If you're taking this away just as a review, then I feel frustrated. It's also the same kind of thing when you get a comment that's like, oh, you deserve more views. And it's like, I know I do. But it gets frustrating when I'm fighting the system to try and get my work be seen. Like, this is the main area I want to improve on this year. And sort of going back to something I talked about earlier, I don't want to dunk on stuff unless I can be constructive. And it's a frustration I have. Again, another frustration with the comments section that, there's that kind of just unconstructive dunking. I'm probably going to I will basically mute people that do that, because I want to be able to talk about this stuff in a constructive way. I want to see developers of new games for classic systems get some insights from what I've talked about and actually make their games better in future. Because I think that's how we all grow. That's in the sense of we get better games, we have more fun experiences, and we do cool things like that. And so if I'm going to dunk on a game I don't like, I want to be constructive where I do it. It also means, there are a bunch of what I call sacred cows that I probably will never touch because I can't do that, at least at the moment. And it's also the same thing why I don't want to cover new games unless I have the right things I can say about them. But the last sort of bit I really want to talk about on the challenges is the community side of things. Maybe it's just my kind of personality, but I do clash with people. I am a bit of a stickler for things. Like, I personally don't like when a top level comment is off topic. Like, if you're leaving comments on a video that's not about the game being played or examined or whatever, and you're like, it just gets frustrating because it's like, well, isn't that what this is about? Isn't that what the comment section is for? Maybe I'm wrong about that. I also really feel frustrated in, I don't like looking at my audience, who are people mostly older than me. I really don't like a lot of clickbaity things. It's why I go for a very nice style cover for the videos. I hate arrows and clickbait titles and whatnot. I also don't like really YouTuber face. I want to take this as a semi-respectful look at these games and their history. And even doing an update, I'm going to think of how I'm going to shoot a cover image for this video later. But one of those things is I really feel that a challenge for me is like laying down where the direction of the content is for me. These videos, where I'm coming from, these angles, and having a community that sort of gets it. Talking to the void is a really depressing thing to go through, especially because for me last year, the channel was my major community outlet. Without being able to attend the gaming groups I go to, without being able to really talk stuff over in detail with people, the channel and people, sharing these games I enjoy, and it's kind of why I find myself bouncing off a lot of other kind of videos really last year, because I don't want to get into arguments, but I want to be able to have a nice civil discussion. A lot of people don't think that's possible in comment sections. I disagree. You have to be moderate, you have to moderate it well, and you need to have the right kind of viewers to do it. And that's really where I think a lot of work is for me this year. I think I'm going to have moderation rules, and I'm going to be strict about them because I want to make things better, a cooler community. So, that's the challenges. And now this really last bit is just some of the stuff about 2021. When I talked about the challenge of just getting stuff in front of people, I am convinced more than ever I need a way that's not algorithmically driven to do it. And so one of those things for me is actually setting up an email list. I don't have it up now as I'm filming, but by the time this video goes out in a few days, there'll be a mailing list set up that you can sign up to, and it will basically I will send out one email, every so often as new episodes come out. I feel like having that in your inbox might be a better way, especially if you aren't interested in everything I do. Whilst I'm disappointed that that's the case, you are free to watch whatever you want. You might only care about one machine, which I'm disappointed, because I think that going outside your comfort zone is the best thing. It's what I really enjoy of the hobby. But I have to acknowledge that not everyone's going to do that. And of course, if you like the idea of supporting your favourite small creators, you can support the channel on Patreon and get early access to videos, which are emailed to you, so you don't need to sign up for a mailing list for that. And I get a little more coin to help invest in the channel. Win-win. Hashtag plug. The second thing I want to do is I want to revisit the ideas I did with the Extra series. The original idea of it was to do sort of occasional topics that are tangentially related to classic game playing and exploration, but sort of formalize it a bit more. And I feel like maybe using this as a way to ramp up to doing a third video a month. So having a couple of extra series. The first one, the one that's sort of probably going to be the first I do, is a series which looks at hardware and add-ons and bits that allow you to sort of more enjoy classic games on original hardware in this modern era. So things like, for example, a good example is under this series, the RetroTing 2X SCART video would probably have come under it. I've got at least a bunch of footage filmed for what would probably be the first that I'll probably start trying to work on. Have that go out next month. Another example I want to do is sort of a series, just a soapbox kind of series where I sit down, like I am now, stand up actually, and just talk about some issues, do some research, do some sort of video essay kind of stuff around classic games and classic games culture and things like that. Hopefully as a point of discussion. And the other one is to do what I did with the video on the Darius Cosmic Collection, where I looked at how those games fared in their emulation and comparisons and things like that. A series that might look at those kind of things for more classic game compilations, because we're seeing more of them come out, which I think is a good way for having older games reissued in a convenient form. So maybe something like that too. And of course, as we get closer to Spectrum Next's issue 2 releasing August, there'll probably be more coverage there, just really refreshing where things are at with the Next at this point in time. And looking at my notes, that's basically everything. Thank you all so very much for taking the time out to watch this. I'm really looking forward to 2021 on the channel. I'm looking forward to covering more interesting games for classic computers and consoles. Some of the stuff you might know, some of the stuff you might not, some of the stuff you might not really be intimately familiar with, and sometimes something that gets you a chance to reevaluate and maybe see it in a better light. There's a lot of cool things out there, and I really want to do my part in encouraging a more thoughtful exploration of the hobby. So, of course, thank you very much for that. Thanks to everyone supporting the channel over on Patreon. It has really helped in so many ways, particularly last year. I won't lie about that. The plans for the next few weeks. Next week, the 16th, there's going to be a my games of 2020, which is just a look at a bunch of stuff I really enjoyed last year for modern, for retro, new in general, and new to me. And the weekend after that, 23rd, is going to be the first Scanlines of the year, episode number 49. I don't know what that's going to be yet. And then, of course, we're back on a standard 2 games per month deal up till August, and 1 in December, so I can have a bit of a break, which has been really good for me, just to play some modern stuff and relax a bit. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this, and I will catch you on the next one.